So we will start the County Operations Committee meeting for Tuesday, April 25th. So the first action item is to approve the minutes of March 28th and the minutes of April 13th. So I need a motion for that. Rob is the first and Camille has the second. Any questions, corrections to the minutes? All right, Nate.
I did notice that it references the chairman as chairman, but no on the first minutes there.
But yeah, I'll say that was a test that Jan gave us because we wanted to make sure people actually read it. So thank you for reading it. Yes, you did well. Thank you, Jan, for the quiz. Yep. I think a few others like Rob found it too. So, but appreciate that. So we will make that note to make a correction on the public comment section of the right chairperson. Any other comments or corrections? And thank you for reading and giving feedback. All right.
I was just going to say, under your local rules, you do need a motion and a second and a vote to get Mr. Elsasser to participate remotely.
Sorry, Mr. Elsasser. Yeah, Ryan Elsasser is joining via phone, so we need a motion to put him on the meeting. Can I get a motion? Danny and Nate. All right. All in favor of Brian Elsasser joining remotely with the sign of aye? Aye. Those opposed with a nay? All right, Brian, welcome.
Thank you.
All right. So, Brian, any input for the minutes?
No.
Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes with the correction that was identified? All in favor with the sign of aye? Aye. Those opposed with a nay? All right. That passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll move to the informational items. I'll pass it to Mr. Sorrell to do the workforce report and the workers' compensation and liability reports.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Workforce report is on page 4 of the packet. This is a monthly report. It shows activity for the month ending of March of this year. Committee members are probably not familiar with it, but for the listening audience or the streaming audience, the top third of the page shows applicants and hires, both from a racial and gender perspective, and also compares the current year to the prior year. Just a note, as we make every month, just because someone was hired in the month of March does not automatically equate that position filling to a position that opened and applied in March, as sometimes some hiring processes take more than the month-long period. Middle third of the page is the diversity of the workforce at this current time, or as of the end of March, and the bottom third of the page shows separations. Based on, I think, some feedback that we had from the committee prior, you'll see that we've divided the separations by resignations, retirements, or other, and that shows you what those data points are, and then in terms of where the separations came from is in the very bottom corner of the page. Happy to answer any questions about that report before we move on to the liability and work comp report.
Any questions from the committee? I would like to, okay, Nate?
I just wanted to comment and a shout out to the HR department for including my separation classification. So that's most helpful when I read the report.
No, thank you for that. I'll just make another comment regarding personnel. Mr. Sorrell and I had a comment the other day, or conversation about documenting or putting together maybe a quarterly report on personnel headcount, just so we had a tracking of how we're doing countywide on personnel. So I'll put that out there. If any of the committee members have a recommendation of how you'd like to see that presented. I think Mr. Sorrell has an idea how he'd like to present it. I don't know if you want to give them any comments, and they can think about it for the next cycle.
I think maybe what we'll do is we'll maybe put something in the weekly update so that this week, so that everybody has an opportunity to review that and solicit some feedback that way. But as at a high level, I think what we want to try and show in that workforce report is going a little bit more in depth in terms of what you see in the middle third of this page, and then also looking at it at a department level as it relates to positions that you approved in the budget versus how many are actually filled. And so at the end of the day, it kind of becomes a vacancy rate type of report, or that may end up being the more telling data point is what the current vacancy rate is for the entire organization, and as best we can in the individual offices and departments.
Okay, thank you. We can move to liability.
Sure. So this is on page 5 of your packet. This is a quarterly report, so this is for the first quarter of this year. The top half of the page deals with liability claims. So those are that could be any type of insurance claim that we might have that is not work comp related. So that could be property, that could be litigation, it could be any type of liability cost that we've incurred. And you'll see just real quickly, top left quadrant of the page is claims by year, so we show multiple years. The bar represents the number of claims that have been filed, and as of the end of the first quarter, the green line represents those that are still active. So you can actually see, as an example, in 2016, there were 26 claims filed, and we actually still have one active. The top right quadrant takes those active claims and shows you how much we've paid out to date for all of the claims, and how much of the reserve is still remaining. And from a reserve standpoint, that's the information that and the data that our carrier for whatever policy is being used will establish a reserve for that claim in terms of how much they think the claim may end up being in total over the lifespan of the process. Bottom half of the page is specific to workers' compensation. And so you'll see in the bottom left quadrant, same data type point that you see above it, number of claims filed by year, and then the number of claims that are still active at the time of the report, which again is the end of the first quarter. So you can see in calendar year 2021, we had 54 claims, and 3 of those are still active, as an example. And then bottom right quadrant of the page, similar information to what's above it is in terms of those open claims, how much have we paid out on those claims, and how much of the reserve is still remaining. So just as a quick example, again, using 2021, we've paid out $287,535, and we've got about $99,500 of reserve remaining, which again is what the carrier believes our exposure might be for the 3 remaining active claims. With that, happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions from the committee on that? I find this useful, at least from my perspective. I don't know if anyone has any recommendations or adjustments, but I think it does a good job of giving us some visibility into some past and then what liability we still have outstanding by calendar year. So to me, it's a good report to look at. Obviously, if there's specific questions that you may have about a particular year or topic, I would suggest that you reach out to Mr. Sorrell and have that discussion and make sure that your questions are answered. All right. Well, thank you. We will now move into, we have one action item under joint resolution. So this is a resolution with the Finance and Audit and Legislative Affairs Committee. This is for the Tyler Enterprise Supervision add-on or system, and I think I'll turn it to the tag team. Oh, I have to get a, yeah, thank you. Man, I'm sliding here. I need a motion to put that on the floor. All right, Sharon's the first, and Mr. Phelan is the second. Now it's on the floor. I'll turn it over to Mr. Brown and Mr. Little to present to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're here today to ask for funding approval from the IT fund balance in the amount of $376,995 for the implementation of Tyler Enterprise Supervision. This was a project that we were engaged with the probation department back in 2021 when the Illinois Supreme Court began mandating some new data collection sets. And those are new questions that they must provide, and I'll let Brian kind of go into that workflow and how that works. But when we talk new questions, we're talking a total of up to 4,000 new data sets that have to be included when somebody comes into probation. There's 2 steps to that, 754 in the beginning, and then another potential 3,360 sets at the end of questions in a second part of that. So a lot more work for them. And if you read through this, you saw everything we've tried to do with our current version, our current probation system, which we went live in 2013, which this board approved in early of 2012. And unfortunately, it does not have the capability to gather this much data, and the cost to change that would, be very expensive. So in the meantime, Tyler has released a new, what they call enterprise supervision, which is a software as a service solution, which is a cloud-based system that I would say our current probation system has done a great job since that time. But there's been changes and advances in probation, and what this does is it allows us to do a migration to that new system, and this will fund that process. We've been involved for 2 years from an IT perspective and tried to get the old one to do what we needed to do, and it's just not capable. I have been involved for the last year, actually, in working on trying to negotiate this price, and in the beginning, I didn't feel it was fair for the pricing was fair for an organization that has several Tyler projects and has been a customer for a long time. So I went back about a year ago, and this price was actually about $150,000 higher. So over the last 12 months, we've brought this price down. And I do know that Brian is under the Supreme Court in the fact that they're mandating this new data, but the fact that this is coming before you today, they are prolonging the implementation of it here if we put this in. And I know he has if he doesn't get this, he's going to have to add headcount to his group to be able to gather this data. So I'll turn it over to Brian, let him talk a little bit about how it affects him.
Yes, good afternoon. Yes, as Mark stated very nicely, it is a daunting task. It is statewide mandate. So what it is really is collecting data on every intake of a client, which is just an overwhelming task. We're looking at probably 3 FTEs just to collect that, and then we would still have to work with IT to create a separate database and interface up to the Supreme Court's to upload all that information. Tyler Supervision, as Mark stated, does have a solution. It has been implemented in 1 county so far, and that is Morgan County, and it seems to work. Really what it cuts down is about an additional 6 hours, maybe more, per intake, and get that down to under an hour the way that the new supervision functions. So be happy to answer any questions on that intake process.
Any questions from the committee on this? Mr. Renaud.
I have 2 questions. One is, a lot of times with state mandates, there's funding that's offered. Has there been any funding offered for this?
Yes. So I was hesitant to say because it hasn't been approved in the budget, the state budget. They have asked for some funding. $12,000 per data set is what they have asked for. If that's approved, we will be able to recoup some of those costs. I did ask for a variance in our annual plan to the AOIC, the Supreme Court. They did grant us the variance to have to do this, but we have to report back to them monthly on the progress of the implementation. But once we expend some of those, there's potential to recoup some of that cost.
Then you mentioned FTEs. Is that the FTEs would be in lieu of this funding for the software?
Yes, and those would be non-reimbursable FTEs, so those would be all county-funded FTEs.
If this didn't go through, you would need
Correct.
those. Okay. Is there any headcount that you need to catch up to where we are at this point?
We will figure that out. We will catch up. So it'll be a tall task, but we'll be able to get that done. And getting that variance from the Supreme Court gives us some time on that deadline. So we'll just plug away as we go. So
And I don't know if it's possible. I'd encourage possibly internships to help
Yep.
with that. All right. Thank you.
Okay, good questions. Others, any questions on this? Mr. Hare?
Might be a question more for Scott or the finance department, but is that time for this? Ask that question. So it talks about the 300-some thousand coming from the IT fund reserve balance. What is the quickest way to see how much money is in that balance from the reports that I have on my iPad?
All those would be unaudited numbers at this point. I would say the budget book would be the the most recent document. Remember here, in terms of what we projected during the budget process last year, I would say a more recent number is unaudited. Market's what, about 5 million or so?
It's in the finance report for this month. The unaudited number at the end of the year is 5.4 million. So there's 5.4 million in the IT fund balance
So
right now.
it's referenced as the IT reserve fund?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question. It's always good to know how the money flows and where it comes out of what account. So, other questions from the committee? Okay, Brian, any questions from your side?
I know.
Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor with the sign of aye? Aye. Brian, are you in favor?
Yes.
Okay. Those opposed with a nay? All right, that passes. Thank you for detailing that, gentlemen. We're at the public comment section of the meeting. I'll make an opportunity for anyone who has public comments. Seeing none, we'll close out that section. We'll move to miscellaneous. Any miscellaneous items for operations? All right, seeing none, we will adjourn. Thank you.